What is up, ladies and gents? Noli here, and welcome back to another Prophecy meta video. Today we're going to be taking a look at the 1v1, which for me is where the highest skill ceiling lies in Prophecy. That's because all you have to go off is what your opponent's building, what they did in the previous round, and of course what they know of how you positioned in the previous round. So there's some complexity to it, but most of all it's all about understanding patterns. So this video is going to go through some tips and tricks to hopefully help you seal those 100 MMR victories and move your way up on the leaderboard. So let's get into it. Step 1 is about preparing for the 1v1 situation. Generally, it's possible to predict who will make it to the top 2 from around about round 10. It gets easier to assume as the game is narrowed down to the top 4, and for example, if a Zeus makes it to the top 4, their probability of making it all the way is a lot higher than, say, an Odin's. Health is an important indicator in who's doing well, but more important than that is their current build and of course their previous round's performance as opposed to how they've been playing over the course of the game. This is because some skills and gods fall off into the late game. Watch out for that in particular when guessing who your 1v1 opposition is going to be. If you're comfortable with your setup and have been winning most rounds, don't get complacent, but you can begin to spectate your more dangerous looking opponents and see how they're setting up and what's carrying their damage. Check out builds and begin adjusting yours specifically to excel against them. For example, this can consist of dropping or picking up anti-heal or specific defenses. Certain characters also do well against others. Take Amaterasu for instance. She can counter big burst or crowd control compositions. However, when making a change like this, it's definitely harder to pull off because you need a few levels in a unit before they're truly useful in the late game. This advice also comes with a caution. Don't prepare too quickly and remove other necessary elements of your build which are actively helping you get into the top 2. To avoid this, you can even hold on to 2 traits in the store and only put them down once you're in that one-on-one situation. Here in this gameplay, I know that this corner strat is optimal, but I'm looking to get my anti-heal and CC off earlier up against the Devotion Athena who has a lot of healing. So I dropped 2 points in the powerful metallic, which got me here, and put them into wisdom, but only once I had the 2 wisdoms ready to place down. This gave me the perfect counterplay at the right time, so we do 8 more damage than the round before and seal it in 1 less fight. I also bait the Kali into the Poseidon to get Kraken off sooner, which was calculated based on the fact that Kali only had Thunder to do additional damage to my mage. Next up, let's talk about the actual replacement process. I think the best way of explaining this is just by showing it in action. So as you can see in this clip, I'm already in the 1v1 after having a good degree of control over the entire game. Suddenly though, I'm met with one of the best counters to my high health setup, King Arthur's Execute. My hunters have been the damage dealers so far, but the sustained Raijin damage and assassin distraction is essential to my composition's success. So once Arthur targets him and removes him from the fight, Pele is free to target units without the Sanctuary Shield and will rip through my team as we see here. So I take the endurance off Raijin so that he's no longer the initial target, and instead Arthur is forced onto the backline Jing Wei. This wastes a lot of his time getting back to priority targets, letting Apollo and Ho Yi tear through the front line with ease. I use this knowledge even further alongside my opponent's tendency to hold backline positions in the next round. By switching the Jing Wei to the opposite side and focusing her DPS on Pele and Merlin as opposed to Bellona, before she gets inevitably taken out by Arthur, she gets a lot more done. This is a great example of dropping traits that are usually great to avoid the opponent's counterplay. A similar situation would be taking silence off your mages because you are fighting an elite user. The final main category in which you can improve your gameplay is positional strategy, so let's consider the metagame surrounding that. Unless you start the 1v1 at incredibly low health where a single loss can lose you the game, I recommend trying an open board strategy to see how your opposing units react. If you start things off with a closed corner strategy, unless you're using a leader like Zeus, you really won't learn much about the strengths and weaknesses of the opponent's comp. If it's a do or die situation though, I just recommend looking at whether the opponent is looking for a single target or area of effect damage and going from there with your setup. Something that can be taken into every round you play though, is just moving slightly and consistently to give you a small advantage when the mind games start. In this example, I use an open strategy to work out who it is that I need to shut down, and sure enough, Hou Yi is doing most of my opponent's damage. I adapt to this by blocking up his side of the board and swarming that area with my own powerful Hou Yi's bouncing attacks. Here, in this example, I identify that Kukul Khan is my win condition and Jingwei is getting nothing done in her current position. I wanted to strat a Susanoo from my magical core, so I put Jing straight into the front line on her own as a combined assassin and frontline bait. Her ability gives really good invincibility frames which I can lean on to keep her alive. We see that the bait works perfectly and even allows Jing to evade into the opponent's side of the board and take out their tanky Artemis like an assassin might. This is a slightly failed example as the Poseidon is still just too strong for my setup, but you can see how the corner strat countered the assassin dive well, but a back row wall is far more effective up against the Poseidon. Finally, in this situation, I go in quite confident due to the health gap, changing little from my top 4 strategy. But I'm punished by really high magical damage coming out of the Kukul Khan in the corner, caused by my assassins speeding up his mana gain. I change their targeting to the opposite side of the board in the next round, demolishing the Agni and Raijin who did so much work in the previous round. What this also allows is my Camazots to get in on the final mage Kukul and hit him with that 3-second silence, nullifying what was losing me the previous rounds. The most advanced plays come from reading what your opponent will do. This is only possible if you know your opponent or have multiple rounds to gauge their style of play and confidence in their composition. Generally, after a win, a player will not deviate from their last used strategy as they'd rather simply see a repeat of the previous round and don't want to shake things up. This can be used to your advantage, win or lose. If you lost the previous round, you can be fairly certain that the opponent's positioning will be very similar to what we saw the round before. If you win, minor adjustments are all that's needed to keep the opponent guessing and not be that very consistent, boring player. There's a lot of game theory in Prophecy, so keep that in mind round on round when you're considering your setup and also playing at a higher level against more competitive and competent players. That does it for this Prophecy tutorial. I hope you enjoyed, and I also hope you picked up something you can make use of in your own gameplay. Coming up next on the channel, I am participating in this weekend's 1K Prophecy tournament, and also I got a really impressively lucky gameplay that I can't wait to show you guys in a future video, so stay tuned for that. Hopefully I'll see you all there.